Hello everyone, welcome to DSEJ Tele Classes. I am Darshan and today we are going to read chapter number 6 from your English textbook under prose section. The title of the chapter is The Tempest by William Shakespeare. Now this chapter number 6, The Tempest, has two parts, The Tempest Part 1 and The Tempest Part 2. In today's lesson, we will only read The Tempest Part 1 and we will do a reading of the chapter. We will try to understand some basic themes contained in this chapter, and towards the end we will discuss the textual questions that you will find at the end of the chapter. Let's get started. Now this is your English textbook, Tulip series, book 9, textbook in English for class 9th. And I will now open your chapter 6, The Tempest. You can see it right here. And while I'm reading this chapter from your textbook, you will be able to see the same text that I'm reading here on your screen as well, so that you can read it from the screen. So when you start this chapter, when you open this page, the page 1 of this chapter, you will see that on top of right after the title, on top of this page, you will find the picture of William Shakespeare on your right hand side, and there is a short descriptive paragraph about William Shakespeare and about his works a little bit. And then you have got another box where you have something written about Shakespeare and his plays and about the present story, that is The Tempest. So before I start reading this chapter, let me tell you one thing, that William Shakespeare never wrote stories. Like you will find it here, he was an English poet and playwright. And playwright is a person who writes plays. So William Shakespeare has written 38 plays, which you will also find written in this paragraph, and 154 sonnets, which is a kind of short poem having 14 lines, and then 2 long narrative poems. So that means William Shakespeare never wrote stories. But this Tempest here, the 2 parts here, that when you read them, you will find that they are in the form of a story. So William Shakespeare wrote plays, and one of those plays, the last one that he wrote, has been converted into a story and published into your book. Okay, now let us start with the story itself, but before that I will read that the text that is there in this box, which is an introduction about this chapter. The Tempest is the last play written by Shakespeare. That is his last play. It is a beautiful play containing beautiful verse. But remember, we are not reading the play. They are talking about the play. We are reading the story. Play converted into the story. It is a beautiful play containing beautiful verse, wisdom of thought, and the themes of repentance and reconciliation. These are the 2 important themes in this play. There is a storm in the story. There is a storm, a shipwreck, and the beautiful love story of Miranda and Ferdinand. So this is what this play contains. Let's start it now. On a lonely island in the sea, there once lived 3 people. A wise old man named Prospero, his beautiful young daughter Miranda, and their servant Caliban. This is the story of 3 people. Father and daughter had come to the island 12 years before, when Miranda was a mere baby. She could hardly remember having seen any human face except her father's. As for Caliban, he hardly looked human. He looked more like a fish than a man. Now this is the story of 3 people. The wise old father Prospero, his young beautiful daughter Miranda, and their servant Caliban. And they live on a lonely island where there is nobody else. So much, it's so lonely without any other people that Miranda doesn't remember having seen a person. And yes, she has seen Caliban, but who is Caliban? He hardly looked human. Caliban doesn't even look like a human being. He looks more like a fish than a man. So this is how the story starts. This is the first paragraph of this story. Prospero had another servant, a spirit named Ariel, and he commanded him by means of his magic. Before Prospero's arrival, there lived on the island a witch named Sycorax. Now Sycorax was a witch, who lived there before they came to the island. The ugly Caliban was her son. The Caliban, who looked more like a fish than a man, was Sycorax's son. She imprisoned Ariel in the heart of a pine tree and she died without releasing him. Prospero, on his arrival on the island, found him and released him. Ariel became Prospero's faithful servant and carried out his master's wishes. At Prospero's command, he would raise storms in the sea or make thunder in the air. So this is the situation. Prospero, when he came to this island, before him there used to live a witch named Sycorax. But before his arrival, she had already died, and he found the spirit named Ariel, who is now working under his command. He found him in the heart of a pine tree, where that witch had imprisoned Ariel. And Caliban, who is now the servant of Prospero, that Caliban is actually Sycorax's son. So when Prospero came here, he found Ariel there, imprisoned in the heart of a pine tree, and he got him released. And that's how Ariel became Prospero's faithful servant and carried out his master's wishes. So what were the different things that he could do? How powerful was Ariel, the spirit? At Prospero's command, he would raise storms in the sea or make thunder in the air. These were the different kinds of things that he could do. He could raise storms, तूफान ला सकता था, and or make thunder in the air. Thunder, the sound of clouds striking with each other. That is called thunder. He could make that thunderous noise in the air. He could raise storms. Now every story has a one day, you find some place, you find about some characters, there is a situation, there is something, there is a description of a place, people, what kind of people were they, and then there is one day. So one day, what happens here in this story as well? One day there arose a terrible storm in the sea. Terrible storm. And just before this line, we have read that Ariel was able to raise storms. So was this storm also raised by Ariel? Let's find out. As Miranda looked out, she saw a fine ship struggling in the midst of the storm. "Oh, Father," she said, "if you have by your power raised this tempest, please put an end to it." Now this is what she's saying. She's requesting her father to put an end to the storm. What a fine ship is there struggling in the cruel waves. Now she's very young. She's about 15-16 years old, and when she sees that that beautiful ship struggling in the waves, she feels so bad, and she requests her father to put an end to the storm. And she is a little apprehensive that he might have raised that storm because she knows about her father's magical powers. "The cries of the drowning sailors seem to knock against my very heart." So the cries of drowning sailors seem to knock against my very heart. So she's so troubled with the cries of those sailors who are trapped into the storm, who are crying for help because they are going to drown, they think. "Do not be afraid," replied Prospero. "Not a single person shall perish." Now Prospero is promising his daughter that nobody will die in this storm, because he might have raised that storm himself. He knows that. Not a single person shall perish. Perish means die. So he is telling his daughter that don't worry, daughter, nobody will die in this storm. "As for the storm, I have raised it for your sake. I have done it for you, my beloved daughter, who do not know who you are." Now Prospero tells his daughter that he has raised that storm for her sake. I've done it for you. I have raised this storm for you. Don't worry, nobody will die in this storm. And he tells her that you don't even know who you are. Now, for the first time, Prospero told Miranda the strange story of her life. Now, that was for the first time that Prospero told Miranda the strange story. So, there was a story that Miranda didn't know and that Prospero only knew. And now he was going to tell that story to her. 12 years ago, he said, now this is the story. This is how, and this story will tell you how Prospero and Miranda came on that island, where they came from and why had they been living on that island, that lonely island for so long, and why Prospero had raised that storm. So 12 years ago, he said, Prospero said, I was Duke of Milan. He was like the ruler of Milan. Knowledge was my chief aim in life. Now, though he was a ruler, he wasn't much interested in politics and other things, His chief aim in life was knowledge. Wealth and worldly possessions hardly mattered to me. Leaving the management of state affairs to my brother Antonio, whose loyalty I never doubted, I devoted all my time in secret studies. Now he left the management of state affairs. He left the work of the state, everything related to ruling the country. He left all these matters to his brother Antonio, and he never doubted his loyalty. He thought his brother was very honest and loyal to him. He would never cheat him. He would never turn against him. So he left all the state affairs to his brother and he devoted most of his time in secret studies. That's why he's a magician that we know at the end, that we learned at the beginning of the story. So his chief aim was those secret studies. This was what he was entrusted in. So he left everything to his brother, all the rule, all his kingdom, and then devoted most of his times. Meanwhile, he grew greedy for power and possessions. But his brother grew greedy. He became greedy. He thought he would, rule alone and he would become the sole king of Milan. He bribed my ministers and plotted against me with my enemy, the king of Naples. Now, the king of Naples was Prospero's enemy. So his brother, that is Antonio, took the help of king of Naples and plotted against Prospero. He also bribed his ministers and hatched a plot against Prospero. One dark night, their soldiers took me out of my palace with you crying in my arms. They did not dare to kill us openly, so they put us into an old and damaged ship that could hardly float and left us to perish at sea. So what they did, Antonio's men, they took Prospero and his daughter Miranda. They wanted to kill him, but they couldn't dare to kill him openly. So what they did, they put both of them into an old and damaged ship. That was an old and broken, almost broken ship which could hardly float. And they thought, okay, both of them will die because the ship is so damaged and broken. It will sink after some time and both of them will die by drowning in the sea. But there was a kind old lord named Gonzalo. He was loyal to me at heart and was not in favor of Antonio's plot. But there was a person named Gonzalo who was still in favor of Prospero, who didn't want them to be dead. So what he did, he secretly stored the ship with fresh water, food and clothes, and my precious books, which I valued more than my dukedom. So he helped Prospero by putting some water, food, clothes and his books in that ship where they were put. And the books were so precious to Prospero, he valued them more than his dukedom. driven by favorable winds, and then favorable winds started blowing. We floated to this lonely island. This is the story of their lives and how they reached there that Prospero has just told Miranda. But she's still worried about why has he raised that storm. But what is your reason for raising this tempest? Asked Miranda, who was still thinking of the drowning sailors. But Miranda, she is still wondering about why has her father raised that storm where that beautiful ship is going to sink. And she asks him, but what is your reason for raising this tempest? Fortune has now begun to favor me, replied Prospero. Now that is his reply. Fortune has now begun to favor me. The tempest has in a strange manner brought all my enemies to this island. They are in the ship you see. Now all my enemies who are responsible for my condition which I am in at the moment, who are my enemies, like they are in that beautiful ship. All of them are together. For the present, it is enough for you to know that much. Now he didn't want her to know more than that. He tells his daughter that okay, it's enough for you for the moment. Then Prospero touched Miranda gently with his magic wand and she fell asleep. So he touched her with her magic stick, magic wand, and she fell asleep. Okay, तुम अभी सो जाओ. That is enough for you to know. We'll talk about it later on. Now he calls somebody. Come, my Ariel, come, said Prospero. Waving his magic wand, Ariel appeared. Now he calls Ariel. Come, my Ariel, come. And he is waving his magic wand and calling Ariel to come. Ariel appeared. Now what is Ariel saying? Here I am, master, he said. I am ready to go wherever you ask me to go and to do whatever you want. This is what Ariel is saying. Have you performed the task I gave you? So Prospero asks him, have you performed the task I gave you? Yes, master, I have done everything just as you commanded me. I attacked the ship with storm, fire and thunder, till the sailors gave up in despair. Not a single person in the ship kept his head. The king's son Ferdinand leapt into the sea. Now he is sitting sadly in a corner of the island, thinking that his father is drowned. Meanwhile, in another part of the island, the king, your brother, and the others are looking for Ferdinand, who they fear is drowned. As for the ship, I have brought it safely to the harbor. Now this is what Ariel informs Prospero. He tells him that he did exactly what he was told to, and he attacked that ship with fire, thunder, storm, and all the sailors, they gave up. They kind of, lost all hope, and not even a single person kept his cool, kept calm in that storm. So they kind of jumped into the sea. The king's son Ferdinand leap. The past form of leap is leapt. He jumped into the sea. And the others also, kind of jumped, and now they are in different parts of the island. Ferdinand is all alone, sitting at one corner, and he thinks all the other people are dead. They drowned in the sea, whereas the others are in the different part of the island, and they also think the same about Ferdinand. They think that he's also dead. So this is the situation, and this is what Ariel informs Prospero. You have performed your task perfectly, said Prospero. Now this is what Prospero is telling him. You have performed your task perfectly. Now we have some very important work on our hands. The time between now and evening is precious for both of us. Now there are still more things that he still wants to do. Now how is Ariel responding to it? More work? Sir, let me remind you of the promise you gave me, namely to give me my freedom. Now Ariel is reminding him of a promise to give him his freedom. So he's surprised when Prospero is talking about more work. But as soon as he says that, Prospero becomes angry. What? Said Prospero angrily. How dare you ask for freedom before the time is out? The time for your freedom hasn't yet come. And how dare you say this to me? Where would you be but for me? If I hadn't helped you, where would have you been? Have I to remind you how I released you from the pine tree? Now Prospero is angry and he's asking him, do I have to remind you that I released you from that pine tree? Otherwise you would have been trapped there forever. Now he apologizes, Ariel. I am sorry, master. I will obey you willingly, said Ariel. Good, said Prospero. After 2 days, I will set you free. Meanwhile, carry out your tasks with a good heart. Then Prospero told him what he should do, and away went Ariel happily to the place where Ferdinand sat weeping over his father's death. So that's the first part of this chapter, The Tempest. So now let's discuss the questions one by one. Question number 1 is, who was Ariel and how did he come to be Prospero's servant? Now you all know who Ariel was. So Ariel was a spirit. As I told you, he was a spirit, and a witch named Sycorax, Caliban's mother, who was a witch, had imprisoned Ariel in the heart of a pine tree. But she died without releasing him. And when Prospero arrived on that island, he found Ariel imprisoned in that pine tree. So he released him from there. That way, as to show his gratitude towards Prospero, Ariel became his faithful servant. Question number 2 is, who was Caliban and what did he look like? Now, if you have read the story properly, you can tell that Caliban was Prospero's servant, and he was the son of the witch named Sycorax, who had died before Prospero arrived on this island. Right? What did he look like? Caliban didn't look like a human being. He looked more like a fish than a man. So he was a strange looking creature, the son of a witch named Sycorax, who didn't look like a human being. He looked like a fish. So you can call him maybe a monster that looked like a fish. Question number 3. What did Miranda ask Prospero to do when she saw the ship caught in the tempest? So of course she asked him to stop that storm immediately, because she was so moved at the cries of drowning sailors, and the ship was so beautiful, and she knew that her father had magical powers and he might have raised that storm. So she requested her father to stop that storm. This is what she asked him. Now question number 4 is, what did Prospero say he raised the tempest for? Now he told Miranda that he had raised the storm for her sake. You remember he said, he told Miranda, I have raised this storm for you. Question number 5 is, why did Prospero leave the management of state affairs to Antonio? Number 1, he trusted him very much. He trusted his brother, and he never doubted his loyalty. That was reason number 1. And the reason number 2, and the bigger reason, was because he was interested in something else. He was interested in gaining knowledge. That was his chief aim in life, secret studies. So he wanted to devote his time to his secret studies, and he never doubted the loyalty of his brother Antonio. That is why he left the management of state affairs to his brother Antonio. Question number 6. Who helped Antonio to seize the throne? So who helped him? The king of Naples helped Antonio to seize the throne from Prospero. What did Antonio's soldiers do? Antonio told his soldiers to take Prospero and his daughter and kill them somewhere, but they couldn't find that courage to kill them openly. So what they did, they put both of them into a broken and old ship that could hardly float. They put both of them into that ship and left them to die at sea. They thought that the ship would ultimately sink and both of them would die because there was no food, no water. They couldn't survive in sea for a very long time. So this is what they expected. How did old Gonzalo help Prospero? Now, old Gonzalo, who was an old and loyal lord of Prospero, and who was still loyal to him, and who was not in favor of Antonio's plot against him, what he did, he secretly put some fresh water, food, clothes, and Prospero's books of secret studies in that ship, which helped Prospero and his daughter reach a safe place on that island. So this is how the old Gonzalo helped Prospero. Who were in the ship that was caught in the tempest? As we heard Prospero telling Miranda that all his enemies were now in that ship that was struggling in the storm, and we know who his enemies might have been. We know about two people who were his enemies. One, the king of Naples, and another, his own brother Antonio. And we know that in that ship there was the king of Naples, his son Ferdinand, and Antonio, his brother, and of course many sailors. Question number 10. What did Ariel remind Prospero of when Prospero mentioned more work? Now, Ariel reminded him that Prospero had promised him of freeing him. So he was giving him more work. He reminded him of his promise to free Ariel. This is what he reminded him of. But Prospero got angry and he told him that he still had some more days to gain his freedom, and till that time he should work honestly and work really hard, and then he will win his freedom. So that's it. That's your The Tempest Part 1. I hope you have enjoyed the lesson, and as I said, you have to read this chapter once again and also read the questions and then try to locate the answers in the textbook. So reading is so important. So that was your Tempest Part 1. In the next lesson, we will read the Tempest Part 2. Till then, goodbye.